What up, though? District of Connecticut. Be it remembered that on the 14th day of March in the 28th year of the independence of the United States of America, Noah Webster, John of said district, Esquire, hath deposited in this office the title of a book, the right whereof he claims as author, in the words following: the American Spelling Book contained the rudiments of the English language for the use of schools in the United States in conformity to the Act of the Congress of the United States entitled An Act for the Encouragement of Learning by securing the copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors and proprietors of such copies during the time therein mentioned. Charles Dennison, Clerk of the District of Connecticut. District of Connecticut, Clerk's Office, a true copy of record. The American Spelling Book, or first of the Grammatical Institute of the English Languages, when first published, encountered an opposition which few new publications have sustained with success. It, however, maintained its ground, and its reputation has been gradually extended and established until it has become the principal elementary book in the United States. In a great part of the northern states, it is the only book of the kind used. It is much used to the middle and southern states, and its annual sales indicate a large and increasing demand. Its merit is evinced not only by this general use, but by a remarkable fact that, in many attempts made to rival it, the compilers have all constructed their works on a similar plan. Some of them have most unwarrantably and illegally copied a considerable part of the tables with little or no alteration, and others have altered them by additions, mutilations, and subdivisions, numerous and perplexing. In most instances, this species of injustice has been discountenanced by the citizens of the United States, and the public sentiment has protected the original work more effectually than the penalties of the law. In a copious list of names of places, rivers, lakes, mountains, which are introduced into this work, no labor has been spared to exhibit their just orthography and pronunciation, according to the analogies of our language and the common usages of the country. The orthography of Indian names has not, in every instance, been well adjusted by American authors or United States authors. Many of these names still retain the French orthography found in the writings of the first discoverers or early travelers, but the practice of writing such words in the French manner ought to be discountenanced. How does an unlettered American know the pronunciation of the names? Or its consent, or Owa Bosch in this French dress? Would be suspect the pronunciation to be Wisconsin or Wabash. or citizens ought not to be thus perplexed with an orthography to which they are strangers, nor ought the harsh guttural sounds of the natives to be retained in such words as shawangunk and many others. Where popular practice has softened and abridged words of this kind, the change has been made in conformity with the genius of our language, which is accommodated to a civilized people, and the orthography ought to be conformed to the practice of speaking. The true pronunciation of the name of a place is that which prevails in and near the place. I have always sought for this, but am apprehensive that, in some instances, my information may not be correct. It has, however, been my endeavor to give the true pronunciation in the appropriate English characters. Noah Webster, New Haven, 1803. Language, in its more limited sense, is the extrosion of ideas by articulate sounds. In a more general sense, the word denotes all sounds by which animals express their feelings in such a manner as to be understood by their own species. Articulate sounds are those which are formed by the human voice in pronouncing letters, syllables, and words, and constitute the spoken language, which is addressed to the car. Letters are the marks of sounds and the first elements of written language, which is presented to the eye. In a perfect language, every simple sound would be expressed by a distinct character, and no character would have more than one sound. But languages are not thus perfect. And the English language in particular is in these respects extremely irregular. Accent is a forcible stress or impulse of voice on a letter or syllable, distinguishing it from others in the same word. When it falls on a vowel, it prolongs the sound, as in glory. When it falls on a consonant, the preceding vowel is short, as in habit. Cadence is a fall or modulation of the voice in reading or speaking, especially at the end of a sentence. Britannica, Noah Webster, lexicographer, written by Raven McDavid. Born October 16th, 1758, West Hartford, Connecticut. Died May 28th, 1843, New Haven, Connecticut, at age 84. Known for his American Spelling Book, 1783, and his American Dictionary of the English Language, second volume, 1828. Webster was instrumental in giving American English a dignity and vitality of its own. Both his speller and dictionary reflected his principle that spelling, grammar, and usage should be based upon the living, spoken language rather than on artificial rules. While teaching in Goshen, New York in 1782, Webster became dissatisfied with texts for children that ignored the American culture. and he began his lifelong efforts to promote a distinctively American education. His first step in this direction was preparation of a grammatical institute of the English language, the first part being the American Spelling Book, 1783, the famed blue-backed speller, which has never been out of print. The grammar was based on Webster's principle that grammar is formed on language and not language on grammar. Although he was himself assailed for including slang and jargon in his dictionary, Webster was extremely touchy about the common taboo words. He started work on the American Dictionary in 1807, acquiring at least a nodding acquaintance with about 20 languages and traveling in France and England in 1824 to 25 in search of materials unavailable to him in the United States. He started work on the American Dictionary in 1807, acquiring at least a nodding acquaintance with about 20 languages and traveling in France and England. So he had a nodding acquaintance with 20 languages that were currently being spoken in America by the Americans. The first edition of an American Dictionary of the English Language was published in 2 volumes in 1828 when Webster was 70 years old. It sold out in little more than a year, despite harsh attacks on its Americanisms, its unconventional preferences in spelling, its tendency to advocate U.S. rather than British usage and spelling. The dictionary contained about 70,000 entries and between 30,000 and 40,000 definitions that had not appeared in any earlier dictionary. Again, Britannica. English Language, written by David Crystal. English language, West Germanic language of the Indo-European language family that is closely related to the Frisian, German, and Dutch, in Belgium called Flemish, languages. English originated in England and is the dominant language of the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, and various island nations in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. It is also an official language of India, the Philippines, Singapore, and many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, including South Africa. English is the first choice of foreign language in most other countries of the world, and it is the status that has given it the position of a global lingua franca. It is estimated that about a third of the world's population, some 2 billion persons, now use English. Lingua franca. And it is that status that has given it the position of a global lingua franca. Let's cut to Oxford English Dictionary online. Lingua franca, a pidgin language. This is 1666. Lingua franca, a pidgin language drawing its lexicon mainly from the Southern Romance languages and formerly used as a trading language, first in the Eastern Mediterranean and later throughout much of Northern Africa and the Middle East. 1680. They're going to use it put it in context. 'Tis a kind of lingua franca, as I have heard the merchants call it, a certain compound language made up of all tongues that passes through the Levant. 1877. What do you want? He asked in lingua franca, that undefined mixture of Italian, French, Greek, and Spanish, which is spoken throughout the Mediterranean. 1697. Any language that is used by speakers of different languages as a common medium of communication, a common language. So it can be said that Americans, before any European contact, was already speaking English. Well, whatever languages they were speaking or your ancestors were speaking was sprinkled with English. Trading purposes. 1857. These Native American languages the missionaries have converted into lingua francas. These American languages the missionaries have converted into lingua francas. English is robust enough to maintain its position as the world's lingua franca for many years to come. It's in 2004. Pidgin, from Oxford English Dictionary, 1845. Pidgin is the common Chinese pronunciation of business. Again, a language for trade, a language, lingua franca, English, a language of trade and commerce. So I think it's fair to say that all over the world, people spoke English. People spoke a language that allowed them to communicate for trading purposes. Business, an action, occupation, or affair, 1807. To be a person's pigeon, 1902. To be a person's concern, responsibility, or area of interest or expertise. 1869. Originally, Pidgin English, a language containing lexical and other features from two or more languages, characteristically with simplified grammar and a smaller vocabulary than the languages from which it is derived, used for communication between people not having a common language, a lingua franca. 1943. In the absence of native speakers, Pidgin does not present the same constant features of pronunciation and grammatical usage as do major languages. Compounds and derived words, 1853. Pidgin English, a pidgin in which the chief language is English. Also depreciative, a simplified, imperfect, or debased form of English. Let's go back to Britannica, the English language. English belongs to the Indo-European family of languages and is therefore related to most other languages spoken in Europe and Western Asia, from Iceland to India. The parent tongue, called Proto-Indo-European, was spoken about 5,000 years ago by nomads, believed to have roamed the Southeast European plains. Germanic, one of the language groups descended from this ancestral speech, is usually divided by scholars into three regional groups: East, Burgundian, Vandal, and Gothic, all extinct; North, Icelandic, Faroes, Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish; and West, German, Dutch, and Flemish, Frisian, and English. Frisian, spoke by the inhabitants of the Dutch province of Friesland and the islands off the west coast of Schleswig, is the language most nearly related to modern English. Icelandic, which has changed little over the last 1,000 years, is the living language most nearly resembling Old English in grammatical structure. It says modern English is analytic. So we go back to Icelandic, which has changed little over the last 1,000 years, is the living language most nearly resembling Old English in grammatical structure. Let's cut to Oxford English Dictionary online. Icelandic. Remember, the language that hasn't changed, which has changed little over the last 1,000 years, is the living language most nearly resembling Old English in grammatical structure. Icelandic, 1674, of, relating to, or characteristic of Iceland, its people, or its language. Again, Oxford English Dictionary, Iceland. This is the etymology, the name of a large island lying on the border of the Arctic Ocean between Norway and Greenland. Oxford English Dictionary, who was an Icelander, a native or inhabitant of Iceland, 1613. Let's go back to Britannica, English language. Whereas Proto-Indo-European, the ancestral tongues of most of the modern European languages, German, French, Russian, Greek, was synthetic or infected. In addition to the simplicity of inflections, English has two other basic characteristics: flexibility of function and openness of vocabulary. Flexibility of function has grown over the last 5 centuries as a consequence of the loss of inflections. Words formerly distinguished as nouns or verbs by differences in their forms are now often used as both nouns and verbs. In English, forms for traditional pronouns, adjectives, and adverbs can also function as nouns, adjectives and adverbs as verbs, and nouns, pronouns, and adverbs as adjectives. Openness of vocabulary implies both free admission of words from other languages and the ready creation of compounds and derivatives. Words from more than 350 languages have entered English in this way. British received pronunciation, traditionally defined as the standard speech used in London and southeastern England, is one of many forms or accents of standard speech throughout the English-speaking world. A very small percentage of the population of England is estimated to use pure RP, although the actual percentage is as unknown as what constitutes pure RP. It is considered the prestige accent in such institutions as the civil service and the BBC, and as such has fraught associations with wealth and privilege in Britain. Oxford English Dictionary, American English, the variety of English used in the United States. This is the American Dictionary of the English language. physical copy. Noah Webster, 1828. So we're going to go to the definition of Indian, a general name of any native of the Indies, as an East Indian or West Indian. It is particularly applied to any native of the American continent. Oxford English Dictionary, American Indian. A member of one of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, especially one of the peoples inhabiting land in what is now the continental United States. 1650. Ask yourself, who are the people who inhabit the continental United States? When many of you think, let me not put words in your mouth or try to read your thoughts. But for a long time, I guess I would say that American or America was synonymous with so-called white people. This is no fault of the so-called white people, which they are not, because there aren't any white humans, but you know what I mean. This is not their fault. It just, to me, was synonymous with so-called white people, because the story I'd gotten was that so-called white people from Europe, as if there aren't any people from Europe who are my complexion and darker, that they came and they took everything, which is not true. You don't come to a place during those times, of course, and establish yourself without the help of the majority. Now, for as long as I can remember, we've been 12% of the population. I've always heard the number 40 million. So no one has children. Yeah, I know people get rid of their children sometimes, but what, no one has children? A member of one of the indigenous peoples of America, of the Americas, one of the peoples inhabiting land in what is now the continental United States. Who are the people who are always talked about in the continental United States? I don't care what the subject is. It always comes back to these particular people. These people who have been given many labels over the years. All manner of effort have been put forth to fool these people into believing they are something that they're not. Why? In the 1970s, the term American Indian began to be replaced by Native American. Oxford English Dictionary, Native American. In the 1970s, the term American Indian began to be replaced by Native American. 1844, a member of a nationalist political party in the United States, prominent during the 1840s, characterized by hostility toward immigrants and Roman Catholics. The party is sometimes confused with the Know Nothing Party. 1844 as well. The riot was caused by a branch of the Native Americans. the very dregs of society, bent upon the annihilation of the Roman Catholics. 1911. As a consequence of the sudden and great increase of foreign immigration between 1848 and 1850, the old dread of the foreigner was revived. And in the early 50s, the Native Americans again became active. 1978. In no other northern state did the Native American or Know Nothing Party achieve such phenomenal, if short-lived, success as in Massachusetts. 1994. The Native Americans were the surviving remnant of the Pennsylvania American Republican Party of the 1840s. Unlike the Know Nothings, the Native Americans operated as an open political party. 2010. The polarities of the ghost dance songs are part of the heritage of the modern Native American literature. 1835, of relating to or designating the party of the Native Americans. We are in Oxford English Dictionary, the term Native American, which so many of us have been bamboozled on. 1835, of relating to or designating the party of the Native Americans. 1839, there is a party in New York called the Native American Party. 1911, in 1841, a state convention was called. It was at this convention that the Native American Party, under the name of the American Republican Party, was established. American Indians and the United States Constitution by Robert J. Miller, professor. This is from www.flashpointmag.com. American Indians and the United States Constitution. It is no surprise that American Indians are mentioned in our Constitution. When Christopher Columbus thought he had discovered the New World in 1492, I'm not sure that's what he thought, it is estimated that 10 to 30 million people lived in North America. That is, in the present-day countries of Mexico, United States, and Canada. These millions of people lived under governments of varying sophistication and complexity. National Archives, American Indian Treaties. From 1774 until about 1832, treaties between individual sovereign American Indian nations and the United States were negotiated to establish borders and prescribe conditions of behavior between the parties. The form of these agreements was nearly identical to the Treaty of Paris, ending the Revolutionary War between the U.S. and Great Britain. The negotiations ended in a mutual signed pact that had to be approved by the U.S. Congress. Non-tribal citizens were required to have a passport to cross sovereign Indian lands. From 1832 until 1871, American Indian nations were considered to be domestic, dependent tribes. Negotiated treaties between tribes and the U.S. had to be approved by the U.S. Congress. Now, when we mention from 1832 until 1871, when you trace your family through records and you find out who your family is and where they were and how they were moving, of course, that makes you familiar with your story. And then you can see how your family, how you fit into 1832 and 1871. Otherwise, these times are like things that never happened. You can't imagine 1832 or 1871. But for me, this was not long ago. Let's shake it. In 1871, the House of Representatives ceased recognition of individual tribes within the U.S. as independent nations with whom the U.S. could contract by treaty. This ended the nearly 100-year-old practice of treaty making between the U.S. and American Indian tribes. No more treaties, no more agreements. We strong. We got militaries. We taking it. We taking it. Treaty of Peace, Treaty of Paris, signed at Paris December 10th, 1898, ratified by the President of the United States February 6, 1899, ratified by Spain March 19th, 1899. The United States of America and Her Majesty, the Queen Regent of Spain, who, having assembled in Paris and having exchanged their full powers, which were found to be in due and proper form, have, after discussion of the matters before them, agreed upon the following articles. Article 1. Spain relinquishes all claim of sovereignty over and title to Cuba, and as the island is, upon its evacuation by Spain, to be occupied by the United States. Article 2. Spain cedes to the United States the island of Puerto Rico and other islands now under Spanish sovereignty in the West Indies, and the island of Guam in the Marianas or Ladrones. Article 3. Spain cedes to the United States the archipelago known as the Philippine Islands, and comprehending the islands lying within the following line. The United States will pay to Spain the sum of $20 million within 3 months after the exchange of the ratifications of the present treaty. Now, don't automatically assume that the people moving and shaking, making these deals are so-called white people. Because it's not. Nothing happens without your help. Look at today. How does anything happen without your help? It doesn't. And when I say your help, I mean the people who are considered the quote black Americans or quote African quote Americans takes your help, takes your military participation. And if you're wondering, hey, where were my people during these times? If I'm just looking at this document right now, I'm looking at the date of 1898. I know where my people were in 1898. Did they agree to this? Well, you don't have to agree to everything. Look at what's happening today. People who look like you and people who don't look like you are making huge decisions that when they trickle down, they affect you in some way, form, or fashion, but they require your energy to succeed, your attention, your support. Do you support the current way things are going? Article 5, the United States will, upon the signature of this present treaty, send back to Spain at its own cost the Spanish soldiers taken as prisoners of war on the capture of Manila by the American forces. Spain will, upon the exchange of the ratification of the present treaty, proceed to evacuate the Philippines as well as the island of Guam on terms similar to those agreed upon by the commissioners appointed to arrange for the evacuation of Puerto Rico and other islands in the West Indies under the Protocol of August 12, 1898, which is to continue in force until its provisions are completely executed. Article 9. Spanish subjects, natives of the peninsula, residing in the territory over which Spain by the present-day treaty, the civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress. Article 10. The inhabitants of the territories over which Spain relinquishes or cedes her sovereignty shall be secured in the free exercise of their religion. Article 17. The present treaty shall be ratified by the President of the United States, by and which the advice and consent of the Senate thereof, and by Her Majesty, the Queen Regent of Spain, and the ratification shall be exchanged at Washington within 6 months from the date hereof, or earlier if possible. Oxford English Dictionary, NIGGER, with the hard ER, The word was initially used as a neutral term and only began to acquire a derogatory connotation from the mid-18th century onwards. In standard English usage, the word Negro had already become the usual neutral term by the end of the 17th century. 1577, used by people who are not black as a relatively neutral or occasionally positive term with no specifically hostile intent. NIGGER with the hard ER. In 1577, used by people who are not black as a relatively, whatever black is, we know, we don't want to get into that. Used by people who are not black, who are not brown, who are not you, as a relatively neutral or occasionally positive term with no specifically hostile intent, like we use it for each other today. And the people who don't look like us necessarily or have the same complexion as us necessarily, they use it. Sometimes they're okay. Sometimes they're subject to a beating. And I'm telling you, a nigger will stomp you. Unbelievable. Here they're putting it into context. 1993, I've heard livestock men speak in admiration of a black cowboy and noted rider in the Jordan Valley. I've heard livestock men speak in admiration of a black cowboy and noted rider in the Jordan Valley country simply as Nigger Bill. They weren't trying to be derogatory. It's giving him his flowers. 1831, used by black people, especially African Americans, properly Americans, as a neutral or favorable term. Let's put all this together. Let's get past the confusion. No more confusion. Just put these things together. But you also have something. You also have something that's not written. You also have something that's not online. You have something that is within you that you are born with. something that allows you to decipher things. Use your own mind. It's okay. It's okay to provide sources. Yeah, I need sources. Da, 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 da. I don't believe anything. No one believes anything unless you show it to them on paper. 1831, used by black people, especially African Americans, properly Americans, as a neutral or favorable term. 1831, putting it into context. You be right there, observed Sambo. Else, what fur he go more among niggas than the white trash? See what I'm saying? Y'all get upset. Y'all get upset when pink and gray people say the word nigga. Y'all get upset, real upset. I'm talking about ready to like end somebody. When it's really not really using it in a derogatory way. And the people who using it and got bad intentions behind it, it's just that they have bad intentions towards you specifically. That person specifically has bad intentions. Hold that person accountable. Let's shake it. 1848, now chiefly in African American usage or properly American usage, a person, a fellow, regardless of skin color. The term among black Americans does not usually carry negative connotations. 1970, U.S. Any person who behaves in a manner associated with African Americans, properly Americans, a person who identifies with African Americans, properly American culture, as opposed to middle class white culture. We're not going to touch on the middle class white culture, but it says a person who identifies with African American, properly American culture. And you see this widespread. Any immigrant that comes here who's been here for a little while, they use it. They call one another the term. They call one another the term. They've come to be able to relate. They want to acclimate. They want to be your friend. Let's be friends. That's all. 1914, a dark brown color. Nigga, a dark brown color. Come on, put this stuff together. Now they're going to use it in, let's see. Okay. Red nigga. 1837, North American, derogatory and offensive. An indigenous person of North America. You never called the 1837 a red nigga. 1837, North American, derogatory and offensive, an indigenous person of North America. Nigga toe. 1853, U.S. slang, a variety of potato, a Brazil nut. Nigger, duck. 1876, U.S. now rare, the North American black duck. Nigger, fish. 1876, North American now rare, the coney. Negro fish, formerly also the winter flounder. See? It was calling fish and ducks this. Nigger town, 1892, U.S. slang, a neighborhood with predominantly black residents. See this black American thing, Indian thing? See how this go? Yeah, let's go. I'm not calling you anything. Tell me your name. I'll call you your name. That's what I want you to call me. My name. There's no need to guess what your people were. Start calling yourself something just because somebody else called themselves something or just because they think you're something. Let's not do that. What did your people call you? What did your people call themselves? It says 1843, heathen engine niggas. Heathen engine niggas. 1843. Also 1843. Also 1843. A dark-skinned person of any origin. In early U.S. use, usually with reference to American Indians. Do the right thing.